On to the black metal rainbow of death.
Reading Rainbow of Death.
The badass book jockey.
It's the Reading Rainbow of Death.
The black rainbow badass jockey of death.
We got Sean M. Thompson on the line, and we're going to put him through on the Reading Rainbow of Death.
Yeah.
Take a look, it's in our book, a reading rainbow.
All right, today on the Reading Rainbow of Death, we have Sean M. Thompson joining us, author of the short story anthology Too Late, the Bizarro novel from Eraserhead Press, Hate from the Sky, and the newly in physical form and out since October on ebook The Demon, which I'm about finished with and has been fantastic so far. It's got a couple short stories in test patterns, or a short story in test patterns, one in Terror in 16 Bits from Muzzleland Press, and I'm sure some other stuff I don't know. So Sean, thanks for being on the show with us.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
Okay, so pretty much to start out the show, I always ask pretty much the same question, and it really is just, what is it about horror that made you say, that is what I want to write?
I think when it comes down to it, I'm a fairly anxious person. I tend to be in my own head a lot, and I'm thinking a lot, overthinking. I used to have a pretty overactive imagination when I was younger. Typical stuff like being afraid of the dark or thinking there were like monsters under my bed or something like that. So like how I view the world was seen through this lens of fear, which I think to have a little bit is fairly healthy. You don't want to be like walking the streets like nothing bad ever happens. So I don't know, I guess when I like came upon stories that kind of dealt with what I view as like the big things, like life and death struggles and like the fear of disease or like, fear of the unknown, things of that nature. Like, I don't know. I just kind of saw it like, oh, okay. Yeah, this fits. Like, I like this a lot.
And, so pretty much just born out of kind of the anxieties we all have growing up.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of feel like there's a little bit of horror in like any type of thing you're reading, even like funny, cute stuff. Like, we live, in a world full of horrible shit, whether we choose to accept it or not, and we're all basically marching towards death, whether we kind of like embrace that or try to push it as far away from our thoughts as possible. Like, we have some pretty scary stuff ahead, so I don't know, just seems like a natural thing to me to like try to deal with it at an abstract level by like reading about it, like, and being entertained by it too, because horror stories are entertaining. They don't have to be like scary, they just have to be dealing with a certain subject matter.
Yeah, they can definitely be fun. I grew up 80s horror, and I always have a spot in my heart for fun horror.
Yeah, there's a lot of modes that horror can exist in.
And that kind of draws, I mean, you kind of have this broader idea out of it, and it kind of, finding it in everything, it kind of was another question I wanted to ask you. I know I've read all of Too Late and Hate from the Sky, which has horror elements, but is a Bizarro novel, not exactly horror. And I'm 3/4, a little over that of the way through Demon right now, which is, like I said, it's been fantastic. And
I'm glad you like the book.
I can definitely tell I'm reading the same writer, maybe in your pacing and how you, but the overall of each, these are way different books. Just totally. Like, and that's something. Is that intentional, or are you just not so committed to one area or another, you just like so much, you feel better, kind of. Because Demon is a bit more horror. It is horror, and what I think of the indie horror. It's got a twist to it. It's a little odd, a little more imaginative. Too Late is very straightforward, old school Tales from the Crypt, Twilight Zone horror, and Hey from the Sky is just nuts. that's just out there.
I mean, it's not being like perfectly honest about it. Like, I would prefer to just write horror, at least for a little while. But I kind of go where the market is. I go where like I think I can sell books. And I had an opportunity with my new Bizarro author book. Like that basically just fell into my lap. I was just talking to Garrett Cook, who's the editor of the new Bizarro author series, just kind of complaining like, "Oh, I'm shopping stories. I'm not, selling that many of them, and I'm not really sure what to do." And he was like, "Oh, can you get me something in like a month, like 20,000 words?" Then it was pretty neat. He like let me pitch a bunch of ideas, and he picked the one he liked the best. So that was just, I don't know. It was an opportunity that fell into my lap, and I am into Bizarro.
And that's Hate from the Sky you're talking about, right?
Hate from the Sky I'm talking about, yeah. I mean, even though I love horror, like, I'm into all sorts of stuff. I'm into science fiction, some fantasy. And, I started reading Bizarro now because I wrote a Bizarro book. I don't know. I mean, I like to try out things. I like to experiment. I'd say for every story that ends up getting placed, there's probably like 5 others where I try something out just to see if it'll work, and it doesn't always work. But I like to be trying to like switch up like perspective, technique, pacing, stuff like that, because I can get pretty bored, to be honest, if I'm writing like the same kind of thing over and over.
Yeah, and it comes through, and that's, I have liked your books in the progression that I've read them. I liked Too Late, and it was, I think, and I've told you before, I grew up on exactly what that is, and so I kind of read that at a time I was finding a bunch of new stuff. So when I read that, it's like, well, I know this already, and wanted to move on. I ordered Hate from the Sky halfway through it, and I loved it because it's imaginative. That's doesn't do it justice to describe it, but like that is just imagination let run kind of rampant. And then it is kind of refreshing. I do like to write Bizarro because I feel like there's less limitations. I love writing horror fiction, but one thing at least about the type of horror fiction that I grew up with reading, that you grew up with reading, is it's very reliant on a certain kind of pacing. Yeah.
And it's reliant on a certain kind of like style or theme. So it's nice to occasionally be able to just completely divorce yourself from that and like be like, all right, I'm just gonna write whatever I want, like literally whatever I want. Like I don't even have to adhere to logic.
Yeah.
The best way I heard it described, because I told Garrett Cook, I was like, I've never written Bizarro, I don't know what that even is. And he said, dream logic. Just use dream logic. So that's what I did.
Yeah, and
I wrote it basically like it was one big dream sequence, but it was real.
Yeah, it's really good. I had my sister read that book too, and I think that's the one where she fell in love with your stuff as well.
Yeah, what's funny is people really respond to that one, and I wrote that in a month.
Yeah, well, and it's part of it's just because it's fun. I don't read a lot of Bizarro, but Bizarro is kind of it's a breath, especially if you've been reading a bunch of stuff, because it's just fun.
It's a lot of fun. It's not all Bizarro is fun, but yeah, the stuff I like, there's a lot of fun Bizarro. Yeah. Like Danger Slater, he's someone I started reading, and he's pretty great. Like he does a similar kind of like, it'll be like grotesque and like sketchy, but also fun.
Yeah. Carlton Mellick, the third I believe. He was another one that he was one of the first ones I'd read. And it's the same kind of just crazy grotesque, but so out there it's fun kind of concepts. But and then that kind of takes me to the demon. The demon was I felt like the demon was a mix between the two. Now it's not just the insane out there of Hate from the Sky. It's more roped in and has a logic that is interwoven, but it has more of that imagination that I've seen in a lot of the indie horror that I'm reading, where it's not your stock horror. It doesn't feel like it falls to all the tropes, the common, like it feels like it's something I haven't read. And so that one's been my favorite so far, because it kind of takes that horror feel of stuff that I love, but it has an imagination injected into it that makes it feel a lot different from anything else that I've read.
Well, thank you. I do think that, having written, because I was writing for 10 years before I decided to finally put Too Late out. Like, a lot of those stories are from, over a 10-year period. So, you have that, which is, my early stuff, which is very, classic horror. And then there's the Bizarro influence, which I tried to, combine everything that I've learned up until now into my first novel, which is The Demon. Yeah, I don't know. I think The Demon wouldn't exist if I hadn't put out Too Late, though. It wouldn't be exactly the same.
Yeah.
And I'm glad that I put out Too Late, because it taught me, people liked it, but it was also very much like a sampler. It's look, here's me. I can write this kind of story, adequately.
Yeah, and it actually, I bought your next books just based off reading Too Late. I mean, it's a good, hey, here's a starting point, here's some cool stuff. But the stuff that followed it, I think, is definitely where I was like, oh,
yeah, and
this
I don't,
is really good.
I understand, because I guess at the time I was just thinking of it me, it's my work and no one's seen my work yet, and you come to realize once you put out a couple books, it's also what the market is and what everyone else has read.
Yeah. So
you might be a good writer, but if you're writing the same kind of stuff that everyone else is, it people will still read it, but it kind of gets lost in the shuffle.
Yeah. You make sure you want to kind of stand on your own, be identifiable.
Right, but that's tough too, because then if you come from a short story background where you're shopping those, it's this kind of thing where it's we want original stories and a unique voice, and then you shop it and you get oh, this doesn't fit with our other stories, and you're
this isn't what we're selling right now.
Yeah. So it's trying to find that balance, and to be fair, I do self-publish because I got a little sick of shopping stories and the massive amount of rejection where you're just oh, okay.
Yeah.
So it's nice to just be able to be look, here it is. Here's what I had in mind. If you like it, great. If you don't, I'll keep going.
And that I suppose you already answered that question. That's another question I asked people, is especially the ones who are self-publishing, which so far everyone I've talked to has. Rinaldi, Rab, and you guys all put your stuff out, because I've wrote a couple, 2-3 short stories. It's like I said, it's always something I wanted to do, but I thought I would be oh, let's try to get one of these published. And I have one story. I sent it out to 3 places, and before I had even heard back, just sending it out is awful. It's
a lot of work. Yeah, it's for every story you shop, that's almost an hour just to format and the letter, the email you're sending out, let alone having to reformat the manuscript depending on which market, and
keeping track of places that you've sent it, and places that don't mind you sending it to other places, and places that will only accept it if you're just sending it to them. And like I said, I went through that with 2 stories and was I don't care. And so I wonder if that's where I've always wondered if that's where a lot of the self-publishing comes from. Is I didn't even get to the point of rejection letters and was like, I'll never do this. I'll write, and if no one ever reads it, whatever, if I put it. But like, I wonder if that a lot of that self-publishing spirit just comes from how awful it is to try to get something picked up.
I really do think that's part of it. You have to keep in mind, it's not like I was like, oh, I just started writing. Here's my book I self-published. It was like 10 years of like writing story shop. I've probably written like 100 short stories. Maybe a little less, but I've written a lot. And yeah, just like shop and stuff. And like, I'd have like story here, story there for a contributor's copy. Like, this one and this for $5. And you'd watch like these small presses like fold and you'd be like, oh, that's a bummer, whatever.
Yeah.
And like after years and years of that, and like once you get, higher up, like I've talked to people that have worked with like the, big 5 publishers, and they still weren't really thrilled with how it went.
Yeah.
So when you hear like, because a lot of writers, they think like that's the top. Like I'm going to get a book with so-and-so, which is one of the big 5 in New York, and then I'm going to be set. And a lot of them realize that like, oh, it's so much like every other type of publishing where it's not set in stone. Just because you have a book with HarperCollins doesn't mean it's going to sell.
Yeah, and I imagine, talking to John, I always parallel things to music because that's more of what I know, the ins and outs.
Yeah.
Like, I imagine there are writers that they advertise, they spend money to get people to buy the books, and other people they just pick up, put it out, and see if it's going to sell or not, and it's pretty much on the writer to still sell it, because they'll just, okay, yeah, we'll put it out, and if it doesn't sell, they drop the writer, and then it's gone, and they don't put any money into selling it. I know labels do that with bands a lot.
I really think if you're going to be an artist nowadays, it's really important to learn how to do it on your own. Even if you don't end up doing it on your own, just having the knowledge of the behind the scenes and being able to, I think, is an invaluable tool. I like it because I've talked with a lot of writers and small press publishers, and so I had a pretty good like background of like, oh, I want a cover of this guy, I've seen him do this, and I know this editor from this, and so like I just wanted to just put something together that was my own, and maybe in a while I'll have like another press where it's less like just me. And I do eventually want to put other writers out, but it's just like I figured I'd start with my own stuff, because then it's like if I flub it up a little bit, I'll feel less guilty than if it was like some other author,
Yeah, well, and that's a whole the business end is a whole nother end, so it's probably nice to see what you're getting into before you just jump in and authors.
But what I was going to say was, I think everybody should be learning how to market themselves, whether they're big 5 or small press or self-published, because like the tool, like the spirit and the drive you have self-publishing, like that's the spirit that's going to help you even if you're in a small press. And I mean, with a bigger publisher, let's not kid ourselves, they're going to help you a little bit probably, because they just have more money to. But it's still good to learn how to market yourself, because there's a lot of competition and it's really easy to fall through the cracks. And even when you like work your hardest, sometimes it's just too hard to like cut through the noise. So it's good to just keep going too. And that's another benefit to self-publishing, is like with like a bigger publisher, you might have a book, I don't know, every 2 years. That's actually a pretty quick turnaround for a bigger one. Small press, I think it's close to like once a year, which I think is like nowadays, that's what you have to be doing. You have to have at least a book a year or something, something out.
Just like keeping your name in the conversation.
Yeah, because otherwise, like everything moves real quick now. I think it was J. David Osborne. I listened to a podcast he did. He was talking about how like Netflix has a new show a week now. Like, you ever think about that?
Yeah.
And so it's like you're competing with that, and people already don't read. So on top of that, you're competing with like, here is a brand new 8-hour show every week.
Yeah.
And there's no way you can compete with that. So like, I feel like a book a year or a novella a year, short story collection, that's like the bare minimum.
Yeah. And is that, Is there an appeal? That's something I haven't asked anybody yet. Is there an appeal to writing short stories? Is they're more fun than a novel? Maybe the less laborsome? Or is it just that? Like, you can't write 2 novels, 3 novels a year, constantly be putting new stuff out for people to read, but short stories, you can kind of kick them out and keep your name out there circulating, hey, I did something else. But it's
well, part of it is like with
management.
horror and genre, there is more of a market for short stories. Like, horror is one of the bigger markets for short stories, I think. But yeah, it is like, you know, you can write a 5,000 word story in like 2 weeks, and then, you know, it might take you a month to edit and shop it. And novel, let's see, The Demon took me probably like 7 months to write. And then, like, you know, I busted my ass to edit it, and like even the year turnaround, like that was a lot of work.
Yeah.
So like it would be a lot easier for me to write 10 short stories and like put that out, or even 20 short stories, as compared to like a novel, because that's a lot of work. And it's not even just the time. It's also like you can write a crappy short story and be like, oh, too bad, that doesn't really work, and just like toss it aside, because, you know, it's like tops like what, a month.
Yeah.
Novel, you can write a crappy novel, it might take you 2 years, and then you're like, well, shit. Yeah, because then you're like, well, that was 2 years. Yeah, I wrote a book before The Demon. No one's ever gonna see it because it's a piece of crap. But that took me like 2 years.
Yeah, it seems all of it. I imagine it's different if you're actually a good writer. Like I said, it's what I always wanted to do, but it doesn't come easy for me. Like music, I play music, and music does, but that doesn't. But it just seems like all the way around, it's a lot more laborsome process if you think about it than what if you just.
It's very labor intensive. I honestly feel like, you know, being a prose writer and self-publishing and putting my stuff out there, like, I'm kind of ready for anything at this point.
Yeah.
Like, if I was to go into trying to, like, I don't know, like sell scripts, like that's a whole nother can of worms. But like, I don't know, it's just like, just learning the discipline to just be patient is like, that's very important. Because, like, you know, everybody has a modicum of talent, but like not everybody has the fucking ability to just grit their teeth for like 10 plus years and just be like, all right, I'm just gonna keep waiting because I think it's gonna happen.
And as much as you love it, sometimes it's still work.
It's still work, yeah. I mean, this is like my third job, like, yeah, writing. Like, I worked at 2 other part-time jobs, and then my third one, when I'm done with the other 2.
And that's any kind of artistic endeavor. You have the people that love to do it, but then you have the people that love to do it that sit down and understand sometimes if you want to finish, you just have to, even if you're not feeling it that day, there's work to do. And that,
basically, yeah.
So. All right, well, we're coming at about the 20-minute mark, so I figure I'll go ahead and ask what you have coming up on the horizon.
Okay. I'd have to actually think about it. I'm working on one novella that is possibly going to come out in the spring. I can't really say any more about it, but I do have a publisher lined up, which is not me. I'm not self-publishing it. And I may or may not have some other long form, probably a novel or a couple novels from another small press, which is also not me. So that's pretty exciting because they're not me, so they have to put the money into it.
So you can just kind of send them and then they get edited and put out.
Right, because, like, you know, I love self-publishing, don't get me wrong, and I will probably do it again, but I wanted to do it right, and that costs money.
Yeah.
And it's money that I don't have.
And I'll throw in, I was also lucky enough to have Sean help out with one of the bits and song lyrics on the next Mississippi Bones album. So
I did, and I was actually really pumped to be able to do that, because you know how you talk about how you want to be like a a writer. Like, I've always wanted to be just like a lyricist, like just a lead singer.
Yeah, and the song, I'll have a new version to send you soon. I've got my vocals done, the real vocals, and we got the real guitar and the real drums to it now, and the song's turning out really good.
I'm super excited. Like, when you sent me even the rough track, I was like, I don't know. It's fun. It's just fun having anything that you come up with in your basement, like, go anywhere else.
Yeah, and I, like I said, I really appreciate it. That song is off, I guess I didn't even mention that book, Orford Parrish's Letters of Decline. He has a short story in there called Cat's Claw Inc. My song is kind of an extension of that. Also, I got the voice acting back from the lady that's playing Danielle in the script that you wrote for the radio part before that, and she's really good. It turned out.
I'm very excited. I forgot to actually bring up, I have an audiobook of Too Late that just came out.
That's right. We're going to be putting the links up for that, too. Yes.
And
audiobook.
That woman did a great job, too.
So there's the things that are out. We'll have links underneath whatever you're watching or listening this on, or wherever, that you can find Sean's work. Sean, where is the best place for people to find you on the internets?
Probably my official website. Excuse me, SpookySean.com. I'm on Twitter at SpookySeanT. I'm on Facebook as Sean M. Thompson. You can also go to the official Mcmanbeast Books page on Facebook. And I co-host a podcast called Miskatonic Musings.
I forgot that, and I even had that wrote down somewhere. Damn it! I was going to say that right off the top. Yes, Miskatonic
That's
Musings.
okay. I try to push it back because this is about me.
There you go. Yes, Miskatonic Musings. You can hear Sean, and I don't know if you still are planning to, but I know sometimes you guest host on.
Yes,
Spook
occasionally
Lights
I'm on Spook Lights too, and that's going to be a little more sporadic going forward.
Yeah.
But I'm still, I guess, a sorta co-host.
So just go hunt Sean down on his website. I believe McManbeast put out a newsletter as well. And
yes, we have a newsletter.
The last
McManbeast
one I got
Books.
had a little thing written by Tom Breen in it, which was quite enjoyable.
Good. The next one will probably have something from Brian O'Connell, if I can.
Tom Breen is our next guest next month, so.
Oh, cool, nice. Yeah,
that all
Tom's
works
great.
out
I
very
actually
well.
go to amateur wrestling with him.
Oh, yeah. Well, there you go. So go hunt down Sean. Like I said, The Demon has been fantastic. Hate from the Sky is imaginative and brilliant. Too Late is very great standard horror. And I believe I have talked about your short stories a few times. I haven't got to Test Patterns yet. I just got that in the mail. But we didn't mention it much in here. But Terror in 16 Bits, which we talked about last month with John. Sean's story is one of the best in that book. So feel free to pick that up and read that.
Well,
book
thank
as
you.
well.
I was very proud of it, and I'm glad to hear that people like it.
Yes, it's I liked that one. I liked almost all the stories in, but yours and Rab's, and there were one or two others really jumped out, and Centralis was one of the best. So, all right, well, Sean, thank you for being a guest on the Reading Rainbow of Death.
Yeah, it's no problem, and love the name.
Yeah, it is what it is. So, all right, well, we're going to go back to me, Jason, and Frank talking about probably a bad movie.
Well, we're back. That was wonderful, Jared.
It was. Say it to Sean.
That was wonderful, Sean.
Thanks, Sean.
Thanks, Sean.
Bye.
Thanks for your time.
I hope everybody reads his stuff.
I hope